On today's Locked On Bucks, we recap another fourth quarter, not meltdown, but not a great fourth quarter for the Bucks, who now dropped to 2-2 on the road trip, losing a winnable game to the Phoenix Suns. We dig into all of it after this on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for checking out the Locked On Bucks newsletter. If you have not done so yet, you can sign up for free at lockedondaily.com and get your day started with the all-new free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com to get 50% off your first year. Camille, we continue to stress 3-2 has to be the expectation for this road trip. And you were there. You were so close to securing that third win, and who knows what happens in Denver. Nikola Jokic missed, his fourth straight game with an ankle issue. So you were all of a sudden looking at, holy cow, could the Bucks have a great road trip here? And, I don't even know where to pin this one. It was a game afterwards. I don't know about you. This did not feel like a game the Bucks deserved to win in the way that they played for most of it. We've certainly seen much worse fourth quarters offensively for this team, but it's also hard to get past that final play of the fourth quarter. And even some of the defense that we saw down the stretch. I've seen a lot of complaining over how did Devin Booker get such an open look at that shot. And Doc even talked about it a little bit afterwards too, that it was Gary Trent Jr. kind of left his man a little bit instead of hugging the guy. It allowed him get open. And here we sit now at 40-31 on the season, now 2 games back of the Indiana Pacers, and you have the tiebreaker. But Camille, 2 games to make up in 11 games is not a whole lot of time. And just to put this context out there, if the Pacers go 7-4 the rest of the way, which by the way is the win rate they're currently playing at, if they go 7-4, you have to go 9-2 to force that tie and end up getting the higher seed.
Man, if the Bucks could go 9-2 to close the season, it would greatly improve my confidence level.
Who cares about the seeding if you go 9-2? All right, we like where this is headed.
Exactly. We like where this is building, and with everything else that's going on with this team, with injuries and possible injury news with Damian Lillard, you take every win that you can get. And to your point about this game against the Suns, of just the execution down the stretch. That was what stood out to me. I'm just man, just brutal execution down the stretch for this team on their last defensive and their last offensive possession. On defense, as you mentioned, Book just ends up wide open. For me, that was one where it's in that situation, I just wonder why you would play Brook Lopez in that situation if you want to have just a more switchable defense. We've seen Doc sub offense for defense. In that situation, I would have loved to see a more defensive subs, maybe Andre, somebody who can just go out there and be able to switch during those rotations, which again, you miss Jericho Sims out there. You miss.
I feel like you were very cognizant of oh no, I feel like I'm opening the floodgates if I finish saying that name there. So I'm just going to pivot to somebody.
We're going to pivot, Justin. We're going to pivot. But yeah, just bad execution down the stretch there. And then on offense, you have AJ Green running into Giannis on the last possession there, and just some sloppy play. And I have no qualms about the shot that Brook took to end the game because there was no other option at that moment. You only had a second left at that time. So you had to do what you had to do. But for me in this game, it felt like the tides really turned in that third quarter. In the first half, the Bucks did a really good job of forcing the Suns into various turnovers. They had 10, I believe, first half turnovers with 6 in the first quarter, 4 in the second, only had 1 turnover in the third. And you saw the Suns getting a lot more dribble penetration at that point as well. Devin Booker was touching paint, spraying out, getting guys good looks. And it felt to me like the shift just kind of happened in that third quarter for this team, which is not the first time we've seen a third quarter go awry for the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, and that the late game execution, that final play, we've heard Doc kind of talk through it a little bit, and I think some of the guys individually talked about it too. I mean, it was pretty clear. It seemed like he wanted Giannis to get a screen, get a head full of steam going towards the basket. I would assume the Suns would have just fouled him anyway. But get him going towards the basket and either attack or kick out to AJ Green. I like the thought of, okay, just shoot yourself out of this right now, AJ, because that's the thing we've touched on a couple of shows. He was 0 for 4 last night, and um, the shooting splits are really starting to crater now, Camille. Like, we
Yeah.
take the Mavs game out of the mix, and I ran the numbers last night, but I think after the All-Star break, if you remove that 6 of 9 game against the Mavs, he's shooting like 31% on threes in the second half of the season, which we've talked about the defense and, Frank leading the charge of, wow, it's better than I expected. And we all kind of fell there with AJ Green, but he started to pick up more fouls. And I just can't help but wonder if all of this is tied to one another, that he's seeing those calls go against him. He's not seeing the ball go through the net. And I think it's obvious he's in a funk, and I think he's working through it right now too. So those shots unfortunately stand out. Like, I know teams are going to miss open looks, but we've seen the Bucks 3-point percentage as a whole start to crater on this team in the second half and in this last week or so. But that's really led by AJ Green. More open looks yesterday. I'll cut him slack here in that I think the biggest missed 3 for the Bucks was not AJ Green. It was Gary Trent Jr., who had basically a wide open look that would have been the knockout punch for the Bucks to go up 5 with about 30 seconds remaining.
Yeah, and if that's this play I'm remembering correctly too, Giannis was rolling and Ryan Rollins had Giannis on the roll. If he would have just got the ball to him really quickly, it would have been a easy Giannis bucket, but the pass would have had to be a well-delivered pass. And
the same with KPJ when he was blocked by Kevin Durant.
Yeah. So it's, again, little things down the stretch here that are adding up for me. For AJ Green, I saw Eric Name tweet about this too during the game with AJ going 0 for 4. And he just mentioned, like, if you take out, well, since that Mavericks game that we have talked about where, he had a great shooting night, since then, it just has not been looking too good for AJ Green after going 6 of 9 in Dallas on March 5th and including his 0-4 start and during the Suns game. AJ Green has just made 10 of his last 36 3-point attempts. That's 28% in the last 10 games. And shooters got to shoot. I've said it, as long as the looks are good, shoot them. Keep putting the shots up. You have to keep shooting. But my concern for AJ Green is that the end of last year, we saw the shooting kind of take a little dive for him. And then when this season started, it was kind of slow for him to get started. And now he's kind of running into a similar thing again this year this season where the shots just aren't falling for him. And I just wonder, over the course of a long 82-game season, is there a wall that he's starting to hit at this point? The frustrations that do come in with the whistle that he's been getting, even on defense, like he had some really good defensive possessions against the Suns last night. It's just that the shots weren't falling for him, but I want AJ to keep shooting those open. He has to keep shooting.
Yeah, and I mean, you feel like we're one game away from AJ Green going 3 of 5, 4 of 6, something like that, to feel like this is what he needed to see, and now the shots are gonna start falling here, but it hasn't been there. And I mean, it just, I think the unfortunate part is AJ Green, it sticks out most because how the looks look, right? It seems like, and I haven't gone through to look at in the second half schedule. I think Van did. How many of the looks were open looks with no defender 4 feet around or further away? But it just seems like it sticks out because it comes down to a big spot and it's an open look because of the attention that Giannis draws, and it's missed. So I think that's a part of why it stands out, but also the numbers are telling us, no, this is a thing, shooting in the low 30s after the All-Star break here. A lot of discourse already starting to pour in about one of our favorite topics. We were talking before the show about, I don't know, the 3 to 4 favorite things we love to really get into here, Camille, and I see one of them is already starting to pop up. So we'll get into some of those thoughts. And some of that messaging that we said before the game that we heard about Damian Lillard, what is there to take from that? Should we be waiting for some updates and news? We'll get into that conversation coming up after the break on Locked On Bucks. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Monarch Money. If you've ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track of all those funds. That's where Monarch Money comes in. They are your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When you start using Monarch Money, you'll be surprised by some of the insights you get. You never realize just how much you were spending on food delivery, and that allows you to budget even smarter and save even more money. You get all-in-one convenience where instead of juggling multiple apps, just use Monarch Money to check your finances, track spending, and even plan your long-term goals. And easy for collaboration as well. If you're managing money with your partner, it's smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all that stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. All right, Camille. We'll save some of the comments that we were getting to, although without giving away too much, I'll just say Brett is a man after both of our hearts here, fighting the good fight. I do want to, before we get to that, talk about Damian Lillard, because I don't know about you, but listening to Doc yesterday, talking before that game, I didn't get the sense everything's cool here. Like, this is 100% precautionary. Dame's probably going to be back for the Nuggets game. Listening to him say, and I get the way he answered it, if you just take what he said and just take the words and aggregate it, it looks much worse than I'm sure it intended to come across. But he was bluntly asked, is he progressing? And said, no. I mean, the fact that he's out shows you that it's been immediately ruled out. And Eric Name pressing him on, look, you say he's day-to-day, and a lot of times when you have that day-to-day listing, you're questionable or doubtful on the injury report. And it's if you're day-to-day, it's a question. But with Dame, he's been immediately ruled out. Is there something there? And that's where is he progressing? And no, and I do know, and I think Doc talked about this, but I've heard elsewhere too, Dame is getting some additional imaging or something, seeing somebody today as we record this to get better insight on this. But the whole package, knowing that, seeing the games that he's missed, hearing what Doc Rivers had to say, I do not take this as he's going to be back any day now. Like, I am almost banking on, I would not plan to see him through this week, maybe even extending further into that.
Gosh, I I hope it's not serious. But when I saw the pregame comments from Doc with Eric asking him the questions, and I was just kind of like, where he's like, we're monitoring it. We're going to get more information today. I know he saw some people. He's got some imaging done a couple of times. And when Eric just straight up asked him, like, is there concern about a tear? And Doc said, I don't know yet. We'll know more.
Well,
like,
he said no. Well, I don't know. We'll know more.
Yeah, we'll know more. Like,
yeah.
Okay, just something to keep your eye on. And again, the timing of it is just unfortunate for this Bucks team down the stretch here. We've talked all season about just how important it is for this team to make it to the playoffs healthy. And I'm not saying that that's not going to be the case here, but down the stretch, we've talked about how important these games are. And, Bobby's out for the suspension. And it's like, okay, you got to overcome not having a key part of your rotation here. And then this is coming after Giannis was out for a while with his injury. So he comes back, Bobby's gone. And then you get Jericho Sims in the rotation. He has to get surgery. He's out of the rotation. And then now Dame has a calf injury at this point. And it's like, well, we have to see how serious this is. And the timing couldn't be worse for the team if this is the stretch where you're really trying to put things together. And The Dame news is what I am waiting to hear, because this team as constructed, we've mentioned it many, many times, it goes as far as Giannis and Dame can take them. And the last time we saw Dame and Giannis on the court, it was after the Warriors game where, Doc had to have a conversation with them about how the offense is working. And we haven't been able to see the two of them hit the court again since they had this conversation about what they think needs to change, how they can be more effective. And I just keep waiting to be able to see that. Like, I'm not expecting vastly different things, but just seeing how the execution is with these two on the court, knowing that they're the focal points and knowing that it's all going to go by them. So just got to wait. But the way that it's been phrased around his injury, I don't feel super confident right now about the severity levels of it.
Yeah. This is not me sharing any inside information or anything. It just really feels like we're hours away from a Chris Haynes tweet or Blue Sky post of Bucks star Damian Lillard will be reevaluated in a week or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it stands out even more when you went all in to our team is going to be versatility, get younger, get more athletic legs out there. They've continued to really build up that defense. And look, Camille, when's the last time we talked about defense, right? It's been sometime early in the season or late last year, because you held the Phoenix Suns to 108 points in a game where Devin Booker and Kevin Durant were both on the floor. And Kevin Durant looked like the guy he was in that semifinal series against the Brooklyn Nets. So your defense was pretty solid. Once again, it's just, man, this offense just at times, and I know there's no Dame, but can't get out of their own way in this one to finish the game 12 of 39 on threes. It's just, if it weren't for Gary Trent Jr., they shot 25% or low 20s on threes in that game. He's 4 of 8. Brook Lopez, another thing, 41 minutes in this, and Doc even said after the game, yeah, it's not great. Like, we don't want to play Brook that many minutes. I just don't know what plan B is, right? Like, he's hinted at Kuz is going to have to play some 5, and I don't really think we've seen that yet, but it's also not a great strategy, and there's no other options really. And especially, look, if Nikola Jokic is back for that game on Wednesday night, I mean, unless you just punt the game and say, look, it's been a tough stretch, we're content with going 2 and 3 on this road trip, we got to get Brooks some rest. I don't know what else you can do. I mean, Doc did kind of hint at, he was asked about a 10-day contract specifically and said, well, yeah, we can do that. I checked with other people and still have not got an answer. Like, can they do that? Do they get some type of exception because Bobby Portis has a lengthier suspension? Because their roster is full. I haven't heard one way or another. But the fact that we're now 7 days or 7 games left on that Bobby Portis suspension, I mean, the closer it gets to that number being 0, the more it's just, well, either they can't do it, or if they can, it's just not going to be worth it at this point.
Like, it's too late. And to that point, let me ask you this. Have you been surprised that Doc's only been going about 8 deep with his rotation, given the amount of injuries that are going on? Because we've seen throughout the regular season so far that Doc tends to like that 9-man rotation. And we did hear him say, I forget after which game it was, but that maybe our conditioning needs to just be a little bit better. So initially I was thinking, like, well, maybe he's only going 8 deep at this point because he just wants guys to get minutes heading into the playoffs and he's trying to ramp up the conditioning. But again, when you see Brook playing 41, 42 minutes in the game, Giannis 37, and again, understanding that they are missing bigs. So a lot of the weight is going to fall on them, but even just stealing minutes, if he could, against some of the smaller lines the Suns threw out there with Kuz as the nominal 5, and you give Andre Jackson some run in the game, Pat Connaughton some run, just somebody to kind of eat up minutes. Have you been surprised that the rotation has gotten a little bit shorter at this point, given the injuries, or are you just thinking like it's conditioning, getting ready for the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's largely that, and also let the record show it's Camille that's entered the chat with Andre Jackson Jr.'s name at least 3 times on this show. I think it's largely that. I mean, the tough part is, I suppose, my biggest surprise is that we haven't seen more minutes of Taurean Prince at the 4, and that's the way that we're just going to have to get through this, of Giannis at the 5 with TP, or Brook and TP, or Kuzma out there with some other guys as well. That's my bigger surprise in this. I mean, look, we've had the Andre Jackson Jr. conversation that there is something there. He needs to, and the coaching staff needs to figure out what is this development offensively to keep him on the floor, other than just let's put him out there for the final 45 seconds of a quarter to play defense or something like that. Pat Connaughton too. I think if this was 2 years ago where you felt like we can play smaller with Pat in some of those positions, you'd probably see him on the floor a little bit more. Again, we both think he's been effective when he's thrown on the floor. The big thing is just he's not the athlete that he once was. So that's what's kind of the anchor there. And all the questions too about our adopted son on the podcast, Chris Livingston and Tyler Smith. I mean, Chris Livingston, kind of similar to the conversation we've had with Andre Jackson Jr. He has more size, but I don't know what the offense is for Chris Livingston. It's not there yet. And the defense isn't even the level that you would say Andre Jackson Jr.'s is, where you can definitely see the impact. And as for Tyler Smith, I mean, he's still very raw, and you're not going to throw a rookie out there in these meaningful minutes right now when you need it.
Yeah, that's part of my thinking with the Tyler Smith aspect of it. But it was like, I'm surprised that we didn't even see Pat Connaughton 5 minutes, just even a low amount, just to kind of get some guys, just steal minutes really more than anything. And the Tyler Smith point makes me think a little bit about AJ Johnson and the conversation that we had around him of like, well, people look at him and watching like, well, look at what he's doing now. And it's like, well, he wasn't going to get the play. Like, he needed the playing time. And that's
for a team that's perfectly fine with losing.
Exactly.
What happens.
Like, it does not matter. Just go out there and hoop. And for Tyler Smith, that's not going to be the case on a team that's trying to compete for a championship, that's fighting for its life in the standings right now. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but I was curious as to what you thought, because I was finding it really interesting. I was like, okay, we're just going 8 deep in the rotation right now with these injuries. It was a little interesting to me.
We'll take a look at those 7 games remaining on the Bobby Portis suspension. How can the Bucks navigate through this? And we mentioned the Indiana Pacers won yesterday. They have not lost since that loss in Milwaukee, 2 weeks ago. Beaten the Timberwolves twice. They've had some incredible shooting luck on some of those wins here, but the Pacers have caught fire, and that margin is now starting to get pretty wide. So we'll dig into that coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. All right, Camille, 7 games left on this Bobby Portis suspension. Look, I mentioned too, you're 2 games back of the Pacers for the 4 seed. But you're only a half game in front of the Detroit Pistons. And we said over and over and over, this Pacers game, or these 2, are the most important games you have left on your schedule right now. The hope is the 2 Pistons games, the final 2 games of the season, do not become as important or more important. Kind of feels like those are going to be as important right now, Camille.
It's going to be extremely important for this team. The Pacers, as you mentioned, have caught fire. The Pistons have been playing some good ball themselves. So you can only play what's in front of you. And when you look at the schedule for the Bucks over their next 7 games, as you mentioned, before we get Bobby back on April 8th against the Timberwolves, you have this last game of this particular road trip against the Denver Nuggets. Then you're back home for a 3-game homestand against the Knicks, the Hawks, and the Suns. Then you head back out on the road for 3 games against Philly, Miami, New Orleans. And then you get Bobby back for 2 home games against Minnesota and the Pelicans. And then you have your away and home split with Detroit to end the season. So when you look at the schedule, like, Denver is going to be tough. We know New York is going to play hard, even if Jalen Brunson is not out there. But Brunson not being out there is somewhat of a break for the Bucks, just given the way that he has been a Bucks killer, and he is just hard to defend. The Hawks are going to be a bit of a challenge because they've just been a scrappy team all season. We've lost to Atlanta already this year. You get Phoenix back again, that can be a winnable game. But again, we just saw them lose to Phoenix down the stretch here with some poor execution down the way. Philly's on a tank mission right now. Miami hasn't been playing well. New Orleans has been banged up. So at least those 3 road games before Bobby comes back, looks like they should be pretty winnable games. But like, what can you do with some of these games that are more toss-up games? And if you can get wins down the stretch here, like if you can finish this road trip with that win against the Nuggets, and then you get back home and you're able to establish something there, like you're going to be in pretty decent shape in regards to the standings and overall just chemistry for the squad.
Yeah, so the Pistons have the second most difficult remaining schedule in the league. The Bucks have the 9th easiest schedule. Pacers are kind of in the middle of the pack. So, like, again, the win percentage that Indiana has right now, they've basically been winning at a 6.5 or 7 wins out of 11 games clip, which is why I started with that. Look, if Indiana goes 7-4, here's what you would have to do. Now, those games that Indiana has left, the challenging ones at least, they have 2 with the Cavs. They have the Denver Nuggets. We'll see what version of the Nuggets that is. They have the Thunder yet, and they have the Lakers. And I don't believe that Lakers game, I think it's a rarity where it's not sandwiched in a back-to-back there. So that should do something there. That's their next game on Wednesday against the Lakers. But the 2 Cavs games, I think it's important to point this out. We say, hey, it's challenging because they have these games left. That is their 80th and 82nd game of the season. Everything is locked up for Cleveland by then. So how does Cleveland choose to approach those games is something to monitor there. But the numbers are indicating there is a 65% chance the Pacers will be the 4 seed, a 55% chance the Bucks will be the 5 seed, and a 75% chance the Pistons are going to be the 6 seed. Again, because of that schedule that remains for Detroit, and the fact that all the Bucks have to do is take 1, and you get the tiebreaker. You will have won 3 out of 4 games. I mean, the interesting part of this, and I haven't dug into it too much yet, but what happens if the Bucks lose both of those games? I think that opens I think that opens the door for a tie in divisional record between those 2 teams, which at that point it's going to come down even further, a line further for the plan for the head-to-head seeding there. I think it's conference record that would determine it after that. And if the Bucks drop both of those games, you're matched with the Pistons in losses in conference. They have others outside of that. So it may well come down to that final game, depending on what happens in Detroit. That final game of the season might decide who's 5 and who's 6 between the Bucks and the Indiana Pacers. But we mentioned we want to talk about the schedule that they have until Bobby Portis comes back. April 8th against the Timberwolves is when those 25 games will be completed. So Bobby will be available for that game on April 8th against the T-Wolves. So the 4 games you will have him for are the Timberwolves, the New Orleans Pelicans, and then those 2 big games against the Pistons. You would love to have Bobby Portis tomorrow against the Denver Nuggets. You would love to have Bobby Portis Friday against the New York Knicks. Hawks are an interesting team for the reasons that you mentioned, Camille. But look, here's where the Bucks have caught some breaks. The Suns, I fully expect the Bucks to run through the Suns when they play at home on April 1st. Part of it was the late game execution. Suns were just as desperate as the Bucks, having seen the Mavs win earlier that day, and they're still trying to get in the play-in tournament. But the Bucks are also a much different team at home than on the road. I mean, that's the other thing we're not mentioning. Outside of the Lakers, nobody in the playoffs has a worse road record than the Bucks following last night's loss. 76ers have already shut it down. We've talked about this before. I think the Miami Heat are quiet quitting on the season. The Pelicans, if Zion plays, they're at least interesting to watch, but that's a Pelicans team that by the time we get to April 6th and you got 2 games against them, they're probably shutting things down there too. So in the interim, there's really 2 games you would look at and say, I would love to have Bobby Portis for this game. I mean, other than the fact that you would just love to have another big to get Brook Lopez and Giannis some rest there.
Truly. And Bobby is a big miss for this team here. And The Knicks game, I was very much looking forward to seeing how the Bucks would have used Jericho Sims in that game, because I was like, this is a matchup that I think that Jericho Sims could be helpful for with the Bucks, just being a big that can move his feet and switch a lot. So not having him or Bobby for this upcoming Knicks game, again, the Knicks are going to be without Jalen Brunson more likely than not. So like they're also facing some things themselves, but it was just the play of their bigs and with Cat and everything like that. I wanted to see how that looks for them, but you got to do what you got to do with what you have in front of you and with who you have available to you. And when even looking at the numbers, I think Giannis is 6 games away from hitting the 65 game mark, I think.
So, yeah.
And I think Dame is like 7 games away. So I was also curious. I'll be looking to hear what the Dame news is once it comes out. After Doc mentioned yesterday that, he was seeing some people. We'll get more information soon about it, because that 65 game benchmark is very important to players, because if they don't hit that, they're not eligible for all the end of season accolades that can very much help their contract situations with bonuses and whatnot, and just the accolades that come along with it. So I don't know, Justin, it's going to be tough down the stretch for this team. And I'll be curious. I'm very curious, first and foremost, to hear the Dame news and what's going on with that calf. And then just seeing how the Bucks can respond on Wednesday against the Nuggets, because if you can finish this road trip 3-2, as we've talked about, it's a successful road trip. For a while there against the Suns, I was like, man, 4-1, it's on the table, and then it was quickly taken off. So the schedule is what it is for the Bucks down the stretch here. The games are running out to try to get it together. So they just got to really start putting it together. The execution has to improve for this team. It can't be late March and you're still having questions about why the rotation slow. Why is this play being ran this way? They have to clean that stuff up.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we're not doing the Brook Lopez.
Not enough time, Justin, to get into that
again, which I see is just populous out there, and also. Guys, like, I know we love Andre Jackson Jr. I'm not saying there's not a spot for him that final 10 seconds, right? If you say, hey, let's just put him out there to play defense. I think you brought it up too. That was the curious part of, okay, Phoenix isn't going to pound it into the post here. Right. They don't have that big. I know Kevin Durant's a 7-footer, but you need perimeter switchability. So I was a little curious of, will they pull Brook Lopez here and just play with like Giannis, Kuzma, Taurean Prince, something like that out there on the perimeter? But Kevin Porter Jr. was 2 of 9 last night. Yeah. Like Ryan Rollins outplayed him. And Doc even said after the game, he was pitching a shutout defensively. And we didn't even get into curious choice of wording for Doc Rivers on some of the foul calls that he was very aggrieved at and most upset that he had to use timeouts to challenge things and lost those timeouts in a close game. But the fact Kevin Porter Jr. isn't the guy that's fixing this offense late in the game last night, in a game where he shot 2 of 9, 1 of 5 on threes. And look, everybody on this team started to pick up those turnovers down the stretch. KPJ, no different too. So this was not just one thing that decided this. This was a lot of things for the Bucks. It wasn't Brook on the floor. It wasn't not playing AJ or not playing Andre Jackson Jr. It wasn't finding that secondary score. The Bucks just did not play well enough to win. And that's the frustrating part, is we've started to see that more and more, not just on this road trip, in the last 10, 11 games now.
Yeah, they've been consistently inconsistent from, as I mentioned, from quarter to quarter, from game to game. And that's the piece of it that they really need to start putting together as they march into the playoffs here. So a disappointing way to lose when it was right in your hands, it feels like, and you're just like, down the stretch, we weren't able to do enough. And as I mentioned earlier, the third quarter to me was a real turning point for the Bucks in this game against the Suns, and they have to pick it up and rebound against the Nuggets on Wednesday. Like AJ Green, keep shooting. Gary Trent Jr., keep shooting, keep playing that defense. Kevin Porter Jr. has to keep shooting. As long as the Bucks can keep their turnovers down as well and continue to execute at a high level, like they should be all right. It's just can they actually execute consistently enough to get to that high level?
Well, hopefully you wrap up this road trip with a win against the Nuggets. Going to be very interesting injury report to monitor later on today. Not only Damian Lillard, do we see Nikola Jokic and what that means in that matchup with the Nuggets. So we'll get you set for that one on tomorrow's show, and then have the recap of the road trip as a whole as it comes to an end tomorrow night in Denver against the Nuggets. That will do it for today. For Camille, I'm Justin. We will talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.